The silence was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, a clock my grandfather had cherished. The eviction notice felt like a physical blow, each word a fresh wound. Everything I had ever known, everything I had worked for, was crumbling around me. They stood there, my own parents, faces like stone, watching as I packed my life into cardboard boxes. They thought they were teaching me a lesson. They thought they were in control. They had no idea that the game was just beginning. If your family is your world, subscribe now, and become part of our family. Never let anyone break your family, ***. My name is Addison, and until that moment, I believed my life was picture perfect. A loving family, a comfortable home, and a future brimming with possibilities. We lived in a sprawling Victorian house, a legacy from my grandfather, a man I adored. He had always been my confidant, my guide, the one person who truly understood me. He'd built his empire from nothing, a testament to hard work and unwavering principles. And when he passed away a few years ago, he left everything to my parents, with the understanding that they would take care of me. Or so I thought. The first sign of trouble came subtly. My parents started making comments about my lifestyle, hinting that I was spending too much of their money. I was working part-time while finishing my degree, contributing what I could, but it was never enough. Then came the ultimatums: find a higher-paying job, cut back on expenses, or, well, they didn't explicitly say it, but the threat hung heavy in the air. I tried. I really did. I took on extra shifts, I sold some of my belongings, I even started skipping meals to save money. But it wasn't enough to satisfy them. It was as if they were deliberately trying to make things difficult, moving the goalposts every time I got close. The tension in the house became unbearable. Every conversation was a potential argument, every glance a silent accusation. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, constantly walking on eggshells, desperately trying to avoid triggering another outburst. I poured my heart out to my best friend, Emily, but even her reassurances couldn't penetrate the growing sense of dread that was consuming me. I knew something was brewing, but I never imagined it would come to this. The day they handed me the eviction notice, my world shattered. They claimed I was being ungrateful, that I was taking advantage of their generosity. They accused me of squandering their hard-earned money, of not appreciating the sacrifices they had made for me. The words stung like venom, each syllable laced with bitterness and resentment. I tried to reason with them, to plead with them, to understand what I had done to deserve such treatment. But they were unmoved, their faces hardened with a coldness I had never seen before. As I numbly packed my belongings, I overheard them talking in the next room. "She'll never make it on her own," my mother said, her voice laced with disdain. "She'll come crawling back eventually." My father chuckled. "Let her learn a lesson. A little tough love is what she needs." That was the moment the switch flipped. That was the moment I realized that this wasn't about tough love. It was about control. It was about breaking me. It was about taking everything I had and leaving me with nothing. They wanted me to fail. They wanted me to suffer. And that's when the seed of revenge was planted. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I wouldn't break. I would survive. And I would make them regret the day they ever crossed me. The person I trusted most was one of them. My own brother, Liam, had been secretly feeding them information, exaggerating my spending habits, twisting my words, and painting me as the villain in their twisted narrative. I discovered this by accident, stumbling upon a series of text messages on his phone while he was in the shower. The messages were filled with lies and manipulations, carefully crafted to turn my parents against me. The crimson drained from my face as I read the words, a wave of nausea washing over me. I felt betrayed, not only by my parents but by the one person who was supposed to be my ally, my confidant, my brother. The pain was almost unbearable, a deep ache that resonated through my entire being. But amidst the pain, a new feeling began to emerge, a cold, burning rage that simmered beneath the surface. This wasn't just about money or a house anymore. This was about family. This was about trust. And they had violated it in the most profound way imaginable. The world outside those Victorian walls felt cold and indifferent. Gone was the comfort of routine, the illusion of security. Now, it was a frantic scramble for survival. I bounced between dingy motels and the cramped spare room of Emily's apartment, grateful for her unwavering support but acutely aware of the burden I was placing on her. Every job application felt like a rejection of my worth. Every unanswered phone call echoed with the silent judgment of my parents. Sleepless nights became the norm, the darkness amplifying the gnawing anxiety that churned within me. I replayed the events leading up to the eviction, searching for some sign I had missed, some way I could have prevented this catastrophic fallout. But the more I analyzed it, the clearer it became that this wasn't about my actions. It was about their agenda, their need to control, their twisted desire to see me broken. The weight of that realization was crushing. My hands started to shake uncontrollably even at the simplest tasks. I would stare at my reflection in the mirror, barely recognizing the hollow-eyed stranger staring back. The constant stress eroded my confidence, making it harder to present a composed and capable facade during interviews. The initial fire of defiance began to dwindle, replaced by a creeping despair that threatened to consume me entirely. I tried to focus on my studies, clinging to the hope that a degree would be my ticket out of this mess. But even that became a struggle. The weight of my situation made it impossible to concentrate. The lectures blurred into a meaningless drone, the textbooks felt like lead weights in my hands. I started missing classes, overwhelmed by the sheer exhaustion of trying to keep my head above water. The guilt compounded the anxiety, creating a vicious cycle of self-doubt and despair. I reached out to other family members, hoping for a lifeline, a voice of reason that could penetrate my parents' stubborn cruelty. But my calls went unanswered, my messages ignored. It was as if I had been erased from their lives, deemed unworthy of their time or attention. The isolation was suffocating. I felt like I was shouting into a void, my cries for help swallowed by the silence. One evening, after a particularly disheartening job interview, I found myself wandering aimlessly through the city streets. The neon lights blurred through my tears, the sounds of traffic fading into a distant hum. I felt utterly alone, adrift in a sea of indifference. The temptation to just give up, to succumb to the despair that threatened to engulf me, was almost overwhelming. But then, a flicker of defiance ignited within me. I thought of my grandfather, of his unwavering spirit, of the values he had instilled in me. He wouldn't want me to quit. He would want me to fight. And so, I wiped away my tears, straightened my shoulders, and took a deep breath. I wouldn't let them win. I would find a way to survive. I would find a way to thrive. And I would make them pay for what they had done. I started documenting everything. Every conversation, every interaction, every injustice. I knew that if I was going to fight back, I needed evidence, irrefutable proof of their cruelty and manipulation. I reactivated an old phone, using it solely for recording purposes, carefully concealing it in my bag or clothing whenever I was around them. I started attending family gatherings, forcing myself to endure their passive-aggressive comments and veiled insults, all while secretly gathering ammunition for my future plan. It was excruciating, a constant exercise in self-control. But I knew that it was necessary. I also began to research my parents' financial dealings, poring over public records and property documents, searching for any irregularities or inconsistencies. It was a tedious and time-consuming process, but I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The more I dug, the more I discovered. Hidden accounts, shady investments, questionable transactions. It became clear that my parents were not the upstanding citizens they portrayed themselves to be. They were masters of deception, skilled at concealing their true nature behind a facade of respectability. The realization fueled my rage, hardening my resolve to expose them for who they really were. I also focused on Liam. I knew he was the key to unraveling their web of lies. I started subtly probing him, asking leading questions, observing his reactions, and trying to identify his weaknesses. He was arrogant and entitled, convinced of his own superiority. He reveled in the power he held over me, enjoying the knowledge that he had played a role in my downfall. His arrogance would be his undoing. I bided my time, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. I knew that revenge was a dish best served cold. And I was prepared to wait as long as it took to exact my retribution. They thought I was broken. They thought I was defeated. They had no idea that the game was just beginning. They had mistaken my silence for weakness. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The day I lost my scholarship was the day I truly understood what it meant to have nothing. The email arrived like a digital dagger, informing me that due to circumstances beyond their control, my funding had been revoked. No explanation, no appeal, just a cold, impersonal message that shattered the last vestige of hope I had been clinging to. I knew, deep down, that my parents were behind it. They had probably contacted the university, spreading lies and painting me as an irresponsible student who didn't deserve the opportunity. The thought sent a wave of nausea through me, bile rose in my throat, and I fought back the urge to scream. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about their deliberate attempt to sabotage my future, to ensure that I remained dependent on them, forever under their control. I slumped onto the worn-out mattress in Emily's spare room, the email blurring through my tears. The weight of my situation was crushing. No home, no money, no education. I was adrift, lost in a sea of despair with no land in sight. The darkness closed in, whispering insidious doubts and fears. What was the point of fighting? What was the point of trying when everything was stacked against me? Maybe they were right. Maybe I was destined to fail. Maybe I should just give up and crawl back to them, begging for forgiveness. The thought was tempting, a siren song promising an end to the pain and uncertainty. But then, I thought of my grandfather. I remembered his unwavering belief in me, his constant encouragement to pursue my dreams, no matter how difficult the path. He had always told me that I was strong, that I had the resilience to overcome any obstacle. And I knew, in that moment, that I couldn't betray his faith in me. I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let them break me. I would find a way to survive, to thrive, and to make them regret ever underestimating me. That night, I couldn't sleep. The thoughts swirled in my head, a chaotic mix of anger, fear, and determination. I tossed and turned, haunted by the faces of my parents and Liam, their eyes filled with contempt and satisfaction. I imagined their laughter, their smug sense of victory. The image fueled my rage, hardening my resolve to exact my revenge. I got out of bed and walked to the small desk in the corner of the room. Emily had left a notepad and pen there for me, a small gesture of kindness that touched my heart. I picked up the pen and began to write. I wrote down everything that had happened, every injustice, every betrayal, every lie. I poured out my heart onto the page, releasing the pent-up emotions that had been festering inside me. As I wrote, a plan began to form in my mind. A plan to expose them, to take back what they had stolen from me, and to make them pay for their cruelty. It wouldn't be easy. It would require patience, cunning, and a willingness to play dirty. But I was prepared to do whatever it took. I would become their worst nightmare. The pen moved faster, filling page after page with my meticulously crafted plan. I outlined their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities, and the secrets they had so carefully guarded. I identified their allies, their enemies, and the people who could help me bring them down. I researched their business dealings, their personal lives, and their past indiscretions, searching for any leverage I could use against them. The more I wrote, the more confident I became. I felt a sense of power I hadn't felt in months. I was no longer a victim. I was a planner, a strategist, a force to be reckoned with. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink, I finished writing. I read through my plan, carefully reviewing every detail, ensuring that there were no loopholes or weaknesses. It was a masterpiece of deception, a carefully constructed web of lies and half-truths designed to ensnare my enemies. I smiled, a cold, calculating smile that sent a shiver down my own spine. They had awakened a monster within me, a dark and vengeful spirit that would stop at nothing to achieve its goals. They thought they could break me. They thought they could control me. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. From that moment on, I was no longer Addison, the naive and trusting daughter. I was a weapon, forged in the fires of betrayal, sharpened by the pain of injustice, and fueled by the burning desire for revenge. The world would tremble before me. They will lose everything. My parents. Liam, they are about to feel the iron grip of karma. This is not a threat, it is a promise. And a promise I intend to keep. I became a ghost in their lives, present but unseen, listening to their conversations, observing their habits, learning their routines. I needed to know everything about their daily lives. I re-entered their world, feigning remorse and seeking forgiveness, swallowing my pride and enduring their condescending lectures. They ate it up, reveling in what they perceived as my weakness. I acted the part of the contrite daughter, agreeing with their opinions, praising their successes, and seeking their approval. It was a performance, a carefully crafted charade designed to lull them into a false sense of security. All the while, I was meticulously gathering evidence, documenting their every move, and preparing to unleash my plan. I knew that timing was crucial. I needed to wait for the perfect moment, the moment when they were at their most vulnerable, the moment when they least expected it. The house became my hunting ground. I installed hidden cameras in strategic locations, disguised as everyday objects, a pen on my father's desk, a plant in the living room, a smoke detector in the hallway. I learned about audio forensics. I adjusted those cameras, boosting the audio to record their private conversations even when they thought they were alone. I made sure the angles were perfect, capturing their faces and body language, recording their incriminating words. I tapped into their computer network, accessing their emails, their financial records, and their personal documents. I learned about encryption. I bypassed all their security measures, leaving no trace of my presence. It was a delicate operation, a high-stakes game of cat and mouse. One wrong move could expose me and ruin everything. But I was careful, methodical, and relentless. I was driven by a burning desire for justice, a fierce determination to make them pay for what they had done. Liam was my primary target. He was the weak link in their chain, the one most likely to crack under pressure. I started spending more time with him, feigning interest in his life, flattering his ego, and subtly manipulating him into revealing information about my parents' business dealings. I played on his insecurities, his resentment towards my parents, and his desire for their approval. It wasn't difficult. He was arrogant and easily manipulated, blinded by his own self-importance. I learned about his gambling debts, his secret affairs, and his involvement in some shady business ventures. I documented everything, gathering evidence that could be used against him. One evening, while we were out at a bar, I subtly slipped a substance into his drink, a mild sedative that would loosen his inhibitions and make him more talkative. As he became more intoxicated, he began to boast about his role in my downfall, bragging about how he had manipulated my parents against me. He revealed details about their financial crimes, their hidden assets, and their plans to evade taxes. I recorded the entire conversation on my phone, concealing it in my purse. The next morning, he woke up with a pounding headache and a vague recollection of the previous night's events. He had no idea that he had just sealed his own fate. It was exhilarating, a moment of pure triumph. I had him exactly where I wanted him. I knew that I needed to protect myself legally. I consulted with a lawyer, explaining my situation and outlining my plan. I learned about the laws regarding privacy, surveillance, and defamation. I made sure that everything I was doing was within the bounds of the law, or at least in a gray area that I could defend in court. I created a digital dead man switch, a program that would automatically release all the evidence I had gathered to the authorities and the media if anything happened to me. It was a safeguard, a way to ensure that my story would be told even if I was silenced. The anticipation was building. I could feel the moment of truth drawing near. I was like a coiled spring, tightly wound and ready to unleash my fury. They had no idea what was coming. They were living in a fool's paradise, convinced of their own invincibility. They were about to learn that no one is untouchable. The day I chose to strike was the anniversary of my grandfather's passing, a day that held special significance for me. It was a day to honor his memory and to avenge the injustice that had been done to him. I knew that he would have been proud of me, of my courage, and of my determination to fight for what was right. As the day approached, I finalized my plans, double-checking every detail, ensuring that everything was in place. I prepared myself mentally and emotionally, steeling myself for the confrontation that was to come. I knew that it would be difficult, that it would be painful, and that it would change my life forever. But I was ready. I was prepared to face the consequences of my actions, whatever they may be. I was driven by a force greater than myself, a force that could not be denied. The day of reckoning had arrived. It was time to unleash my revenge. The revelation came on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday. I was sifting through my mother's email archives, a chaotic mess of shopping receipts, promotional offers, and forwarded chain messages, when I stumbled upon a hidden folder labeled Project Nightingale. My heart pounded in my chest as I clicked on it, a sense of foreboding washing over me. Inside were dozens of documents, meticulously detailing a scheme to defraud a local charity out of millions of dollars. The charity, Nightingale Haven, was dedicated to providing housing and support for underprivileged children. My grandfather had been a long-time supporter, donating generously every year. My parents, it turned out, had been siphoning funds from the charity for years, using shell corporations and offshore accounts to conceal their activities. Liam was complicit, acting as a financial advisor and facilitating the illegal transactions. The documents included bank statements, contracts, and correspondence, all bearing my parents' signatures. It was irrefutable proof of their greed and corruption, a betrayal of everything my grandfather had stood for. My vision blurred with fury. The glass I was holding shattered in my hand, sending shards of glass scattering across the floor. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the innocent children they were stealing from, the vulnerable families they were exploiting. It was about desecrating my grandfather's memory. The rage consumed me, burning away any lingering doubts or hesitation. I knew what I had to do. The game had changed. This was no longer just about revenge. It was about justice. The plan took shape quickly, a series of calculated moves designed to expose their crimes and bring them to justice. I decided to use their upcoming charity gala as the stage for my grand reveal. The gala was a high-profile event, attended by the city's elite, politicians, business leaders, and philanthropists. It was the perfect opportunity to publicly unmask their deception and ruin their reputation. I started by leaking carefully selected documents to a local investigative journalist, a woman known for her fearless reporting and unwavering commitment to truth. I provided her with enough evidence to pique her interest, hinting at a larger scandal that would rock the city's philanthropic community. She took the bait, promising to investigate further and publish her findings in the days leading up to the gala. Next, I anonymously contacted the IRS, providing them with detailed information about my parents' tax evasion and money laundering activities. I knew that a federal investigation would send shockwaves through their carefully constructed empire. Finally, I prepared a presentation for the gala itself, a multimedia exposé that would reveal the full extent of their crimes to the assembled guests. I included damning documents, incriminating recordings, and shocking visual evidence. It was a carefully crafted narrative, designed to elicit maximum outrage and condemnation. I knew that it was a risky move, that it could backfire and expose me to legal repercussions. But I was prepared to take the chance. I was determined to see justice served, no matter the cost. The days leading up to the gala were a whirlwind of activity. I worked tirelessly, coordinating with the journalist, the IRS, and my lawyer, ensuring that everything was in place for my grand reveal. I monitored my parents' movements, anticipating their every move, preparing for any potential counterattacks. I knew that they were growing suspicious, that they sensed something was amiss. But they couldn't quite put their finger on it. They dismissed my behavior as a sign of my continued weakness, a desperate attempt to regain their approval. They had no idea that I was about to unleash a storm that would destroy everything they had built. The night before the gala, I received a call from Liam. He sounded agitated, his voice laced with anxiety. He had heard rumors about the impending exposé, whispers of a scandal that would implicate my parents. He demanded to know if I was involved. I feigned innocence, denying any knowledge of the situation, reassuring him that everything was fine. I played the part of the naive and trusting daughter, the one who would never betray her family. He seemed somewhat relieved, but I could sense that he still harbored doubts. He warned me to stay away from the gala, claiming that it would be too stressful for me. I agreed, promising to stay home and avoid any unnecessary drama. But I had no intention of following his advice. I was determined to be there, to witness their downfall, to savor the moment when their carefully constructed world crumbled around them. As I hung up the phone, a cold smile crept across my face. The trap was set. The bait was taken. All that was left was to spring the trap. The day of the gala arrived, shrouded in an ominous sense of anticipation. The air was thick with tension, a feeling that something momentous was about to occur. The night of the gala arrived, a glittering spectacle of wealth and privilege. I watched from the shadows, a ghost among the living, as my parents and Liam greeted guests with forced smiles and practiced pleasantries. They were the picture of success, the embodiment of philanthropic generosity. But I knew the truth. I knew the darkness that lurked beneath the surface. As the guests began to take their seats, I slipped backstage, unnoticed by the bustling staff. I made my way to the AV booth, where I quietly disabled the pre-programmed slideshow and connected my own laptop to the projector. The room was dimly lit, the air thick with anticipation. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, a drumbeat of adrenaline and righteous fury. The moment of truth had arrived. The gala began with a series of speeches, each one more saccharine and self-congratulatory than the last. My parents took to the stage, basking in the applause of the assembled crowd. They spoke of their commitment to charity, their dedication to helping the less fortunate, their unwavering belief in the power of philanthropy. I could barely contain my disgust. The lies dripped from their tongues like venom. As my father reached the crescendo of his speech, I hit play on my laptop. The projector flickered to life, casting a series of images onto the giant screen behind the stage. The first image was a bank statement, detailing a transfer of millions of dollars from the Nightingale Haven charity to a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. The crowd gasped, a wave of murmurs rippling through the room. The next image was a photograph of my parents signing a contract, authorizing the fraudulent transaction. Their faces were etched with greed and deceit. A collective gasp filled the room. Then came the audio recording of Liam, boasting about his role in the scheme, his voice dripping with arrogance and self-satisfaction. His face paled visibly in the audience. People began to turn and stare at him. The presentation continued, each slide revealing a new layer of their deception. There were emails, documents, and photographs, all meticulously compiled to paint a damning portrait of their crimes. By the end, the room was in an uproar. People were shouting, pointing, and whispering, their faces a mixture of shock, anger, and disbelief. My parents stood on the stage, frozen in place, their faces ashen with horror. They were like deer caught in the headlights, utterly exposed and defenseless. The journalist I'd contacted seized the moment. She stood, and her voice cut through the noise, "These people are not philanthropists. They are criminals." The room erupted again as my parents and Liam tried to escape the stage and the hall. The IRS agents entered the building. Their faces were grim, their movements efficient. They moved quickly through the crowd, heading straight for my parents and Liam. The agents cuffed them and escorted them out of the building. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, their eyes filled with scorn and condemnation. As they were led away, my mother turned to me, her eyes filled with a mixture of rage and betrayal. "You," she spat, her voice trembling with fury. "You did this to us." I met her gaze, my expression cold and unwavering. "You brought this upon yourselves," I replied. The news spread like wildfire, igniting a storm of outrage and condemnation. My parents were publicly disgraced, their reputation in ruins. Their business empire crumbled, their assets seized by the authorities. Liam was disowned by his family, his career prospects shattered. They lost everything. The charity was shut down. People were furious. Its remaining assets were used to compensate the victims of their fraud. I watched it all unfold from a distance, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. Justice had been served. The world knew the truth. The fallout was immense. My parents' friends and associates deserted them, their social circle evaporating overnight. They were ostracized, reviled, and condemned by the very people who had once admired them. Their names became synonymous with greed, corruption, and betrayal. They faced criminal charges, lawsuits, and investigations. Their lives were irrevocably shattered. Liam, desperate to avoid prison, turned against my parents, offering to testify against them in exchange for a reduced sentence. His betrayal was the final nail in their coffin. The trial was a media circus, a spectacle of scandal and intrigue. The courtroom was packed with reporters, cameras, and spectators, all eager to witness the downfall of the once untouchable elite. The evidence was overwhelming, the testimony damning. My parents were found guilty on all counts and sentenced to lengthy prison terms. Liam received a lighter sentence for his cooperation. As the gavel came down, sealing their fate, I felt a sense of closure, a feeling that the scales of justice had finally been balanced. They had taken so much from me, from my grandfather, and from the innocent children they had exploited. Now, they were paying the price for their actions. I just smiled. It was over. The nightmare was finally over. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. The scars of their betrayal will always remain, a reminder of the pain and injustice I endured. But I have emerged from the darkness, stronger and more resilient than ever before. I have learned the true meaning of justice, the importance of standing up for what is right, and the power of forgiveness. I have rebuilt my life, forging new relationships, pursuing new dreams, and finding new purpose. I have become a champion for the voiceless, a defender of the vulnerable, and a beacon of hope for those who have been wronged. My story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable adversity, we can find the strength to overcome, to heal, and to create a better world. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.